3, 2, 1.
Whenever I read a screenplay and can't put it down, that's always a good sign. In Allied, it was beautifully written and very involving.
Action!
Steve Knight just came into my office and pitched me a really fun story.
You read the screenplay and you say, I hope I get to make this movie. It's just staggering.
By the third act, I said, let's do it. When I was 21 years old, this incredible story was told to me. A man, during the Second World War, he was in the SOE in France, behind enemy lines, and his liaison was a woman who was working for the French resistance, who became pregnant, and very unusually, he was allowed to bring her back to England. And one morning, after the baby had been born, he reports for work, and his superior officer said to him, we have absolute proof that your wife is working for the Germans and always has been. Here's a gun, you go back and you shoot her. And he did. It sent a shiver through me, and ever since I've thought, wow, this would make a great film.
Roll sound, please.
I have a fascination with war movies. World War II was a big part of my life, even though I was born way after it ended.
London was really on its knees. Nobody was sure how it was going to work out. Germany was ready to break the door down.
There were bombs falling out of the sky, constant air raid sirens. But instead of making people really afraid, it actually exhilarated everybody.
There was an organisation called the Special Operations Executive, or the SOE, who were responsible for actions behind enemy lines. It involved using locals, but it pretty much mostly depended on parachuting people in. Often they were sent knowing they were going to die, and they still went. So the story of the SOE in itself is remarkable, and this is one particular evocation of the people who carried out those operations.
A husband would offer his wife a cigarette before lighting his own.
I read this project many years ago. I love the characters and what they're going through, Marianne and Max, because they have to pretend they're a couple. They have to pretend they're very much in love, but at the same time hide their feelings because they're really in love. So that was a very interesting aspect of the story.
Like any films that I decide to do, it's always falling in love with the screenplay. Stevens has a great, way of writing scenes that are elegant and not obvious. Characters don't speak the plot. Plot is always an undercurrent that's happening, and I find that to be really intriguing.
This whole film is about who you are. What is your identity? Max immediately adopts a false identity and meets someone who is living under an assumed identity, which immediately means the first meeting is two people who don't exist. Max is one of those people whom half of him is switched off. And the same is true of Marianne. When they meet, of course, they switch each other back on, which is incredibly inconvenient.
What are you doing?
Testing you. The way you tested me.
He's an incredibly gifted writer. This script had certain details and research in it that really made it come to life.
X, I'm afraid this really isn't what you think it is.
V-Section is part of the British government that was overseeing all the spies and all the resistance, especially in Northern Europe during World War II.
This is going to be a standard blue dye procedure. So if the false information is among the batches sent from London, we shall know for sure.
A blue dye test is basically, if you suspect someone of passing information, you give them a piece of false information that only they have. And if that piece of false information appears on a communication, then that is proof that that person is the source of leaked information.
Did you send it?
I'm so sorry.
The story takes us to a place where you really test true love, and that trust is tested under the most extraordinary circumstances.
I need to know. Is this real?
I've loved you since Casablanca.
What I wanted to explore most of all in this film is it possible for two people to love each other even though one of them is betraying the other? Can that love be real, or is it made unreal by the actions that they carry out?
It's absolutely a story of betrayal. That's the universal theme of this film, and how we react when people who we are close to turn out to be, or we might not think, that they are who they say they are. And that, I think, is what's really great about this story.
For most filmmakers, there's an immediate need to be in the real place. I need to be on location. I need to be in Morocco. And Bob is very quick to abandon any need to be in some specific location filled with logistical obstacles and everything else.
You know, we obviously don't have a shoot to gather, so that's not going to be, you know, so that's going to be.
So he really can go after the essential content of a scene and the dramatic significance of a scene without allowing things, rain, sun, weather, to get in the way and to limit that.
I always look at production design as a character in the piece. It has its own emotion. The movie is a romance at its core, so the production design was always done with an eye toward it being romantic.
Maintenant que tu es là, je vais te présenter à tout le monde.
It's also completely accurate to the period, and it evokes this emotional feeling. When your production design can do that, the audience isn't aware of it, but they can feel it. And that, I think, is what's really great about having a really competent production designer like Gary Freeman on this film.
Do we want to do anything with her? Looks a little dressed.
When we met him the first time via Skype, he had done some artwork and presented other artwork that he said was inspiring his way of thinking, having read the screenplay. He was showing us the way he saw the movie. And right away, Bob was responding to Gary. It was just like they were in the same room, and Gary would show an image, and then Bob would say, yeah, and then we should do that. And he'd say, now, don't you like the way this window looks like down this street, and the way they boarded it up and it used to be? And then Bob would say, yeah, and then you could see the two of them were building on each other's ideas, and it was almost like hang the phone up, call Gary and say, I want him on the movie. It was just like that. But not only did Gary, first and foremost, bring an artistic sensibility that was exactly right for the movie and exactly right to pair with Bob. He is incredibly savvy and smart designer, where he's made sets serve dual purposes over and over again. It was staggering.
Il est 8h32. On a 3 minutes avant la diversion.
We have, 78 sets or something on this. So what I tried to do is combine as much as possible so that when we build a set, we build a big set. The Rivoli set became Hobar's office, which then became the German embassy. Marianne's apartment, it becomes the Ampha Cafe. So every single set has like 2 or 3 sets built over it.
It's a very sweeping, large, epic, romantic feel to the beginning of the movie. So when we start the film in Casablanca, we wanted it to evoke the Casablanca that we know from the movie Casablanca. So we wanted it to feel like what it really was in the French Riviera in Africa.
Well, we enjoyed the Rivoli. It's the opening of the movie, so it gave it a real sort of scope and scale. So the Rivoli is a very glamorous night spot where all the Vichy go and the Germans and the diplomats, and we wanted to sort of just really turbo up the glamour of it. You know, marble and gold and chrome and huge chandeliers and beautiful people smoking gouloirs. We created like a tapestry which was very much sort of jazz deco influenced, and we had a huge beautiful chandelier made for us, which I've not really seen anything like that before, particularly deco. It was a very nice set to do.
Nous sommes prêts à faire demi-tour et là un petit monsieur très mal habillé sort et me dit Monsieur et Madame Berne. Devant mon air dépité, Maurice me dit tu sais ma chérie.
Your set design falls into your set decoration, the way the props are incorporated, the way you shoot, everything falls behind it. So as soon as that scale works, the whole movie follows the same scale.
The neighbors will find it curious if I don't come to visit you on your first night.
The rooftop set was kind of east meets west, so it's on the edge of a sort of swanky neighborhood because we have to see certain characters in windows to establish the plot lines. But it's kind of moving towards the harbor and it's becoming a bit souk-like.
Kiss me.
It's pretty much all night, so it was a no-brainer that we build it on the stage. There's a lot of emotional acting, and again, Bob wanted total control of the light, and he didn't want a gale whipping through, and he didn't want the call to prayer going through every single shot, you know. So that's kind of what we did, really, and then we just made an area for Brad to sit and kind of contemplate. So the whole thing was on a 4-foot riser, and then we wrapped it in blue because, again, you know, one direction we need to see downtown and the minarets, and then you turn to the right and you'll see the harbour and the water. because that's something that we really wanted to get across, that you feel it's very much, it's like a Mediterranean seaside city rather than a sort of deep African city.
Bonjour.
Deux cafés, s'il vous plaît.
I do a lot of the paintings myself, so I do the kind of master shot of what the set looks like. And I will literally say, we are building this section here. It's mainly where the actors are, because the actors tend to enjoy a physical environment to interact with. And also the background, so that our horses and their cattle, for instance, are not walking on a blue floor because the shadows are good and all those sorts of things.
Merci. Bonjour.
Tu sembles avoir tout Vichy sous ton charme, Lambert.
The set design was very, very impressive. They had a lot to do. There's a market and a cafe in Casablanca, and I was so impressed to see all the details. Even the smells were really amazing, and we really believed, even though we were inside, that we were outside in a street of Casablanca.
There's a camel walking through, and that's the reality of what you're seeing on the set. And then, of course, when you see the movie, that green screen element is this beautiful element that you feel is a complete blend between the reality that you're looking at and the post-production wizardry that's blended together. And it's a perfect blend in a very realistic, very powerful, and very intimate story about two people.
I heard an unspeakable rumor about you being in love.
Oh, gotta go, George.
Certain period settings, like the SOE office, they found a dilapidated section of this old factory and refitted it. And you have this very idiosyncratic set that exists on different levels with different beams coming through, and it kind of resembles Churchill's war room.
We put a few sort of fibre boards up and created some passageways, and it gave us huge scope. We could have Heslop's office overlooking a pool with all the secretaries of machinations of war.
They said you had news.
Yes, I have news, Supreme Commander, regarding Marianne Beausejour.
Full of life and people and costume and excitement and, you know, the thrill of the war effort. Whereas in the V section offices, we kind of took it down, so it really was Churchill's bunker-like, which is just a very, like a subterranean, dark, airless environment, intimidating and much more menacing.
We wanted the interior of the cottage to look absolutely correct for the period, and the thing that was true about the way people lived in wartime London is that houses were really, really small. They were very compact. Rooms were really tiny. And so that created a lot of very interesting challenges, considering that there's a scene in the movie where they have a party with about 100 people.
Marianne! Wonderful party! Brilliant!
Getting enough to drink?
Very funny, old man.
What's interesting is we've got some quite big sets that are big scale, and there's a lot of air between the camera and the walls. But sets like Rose Tree Cottage, the camera's never more than 6 foot at any time away from anything of any detail. So in a way, they're actually more difficult and more complicated because you have to put so much more detail in it. But also, when you're doing someone's home, it really has to feel like it belongs and it needs history. So, you know, you paint it once and you'll paint it again, because we've all painted our homes. And then you pull off the paint, there's 4 or 5 different colors. So it's making sure it feels real.
This film feels like an old-time classic movie, and it could only feel that way if the integration of the visuals with the practical production design was completely emotionally seamless.
Gary Friedman did a fantastic job, and it's putting him with Bob and really building this film out of nothing and then creating that atmosphere and this world in such a way that an audience sees these sets and, wow, this is old-fashioned movie making.
Come with me to London. Come with me and be my wife.
I love you. I've loved you since Casablanca.
That was great. And cut.
For the style of movies that were made in the 40s, Marion Cotillard and Brad Pitt embody the tone and the feeling of Pictures of Yesteryear, which were wonderful epic dramas that contained wonderful truths in them about the human condition, but at the same time had grand spectacle.
Now, this is the part where I tell you I love you and leave you to count the stars or whatever it is men do on their rooftops.
Marion Cotillard, I think she's one of the best we have in our business. So I was so glad when she read it and she loved it. And I think she said I was born to play this character. And it shows on screen. You can't take your eyes off her for 1 second. Her reactions, her playfulness, her sadness, she's put in a position where she has no choice than to do what she's doing. And she really, really loves her husband.
Max, let's forget the war. Let's make the best day ever.
I've done 3 films with Brad Pitt. What's great about being on a set with him is that he brings an incredible generosity and warmth and openness and humor to every situation. And he's all about encouraging creativity from those around him.
Except one of these, it's got to be like on the string, smooth.
Okay. Marion Cotillard, I mean, she's incredible. She's wonderfully Parisian and got this kind of dry sense of humor, consummate, extraordinary performer. And, you know, the two of them, when you come in, it's great. We've been having quite a lot of time together, so it's nice. So there's a real sense of warmth and ease and generosity.
C'est moi. This is really me.
I loved the story. I loved the fact that it's a very entertaining movie and at the same time a very deep, profound love story. And of course, when I heard that Bob Zemeckis was on board and Brad Pitt as well, it was even more exciting.
We've had a setback. I can't talk about it.
When it comes to a character who gets embroiled in a complicated situation, Brad Pitt can always deliver that because he's great at being able to portray characters who are in anguish and in pain and confused and trying to figure out what's going on. And he really rose to the occasion.
It feels dynamic to me.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's like the world's spinning a little bit behind him.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it's great.
Brad Pitt is an amazing actor. He's proved it so many times. And what was interesting with this movie was that for the 3 of us, Bob Zemeckis, Brad Pitt, and me, we're not used to tell big love stories like this one. So before we started shooting, we sat together with the producer and the writer, and we really had very deep discussion about the characters, about the story, so we got to know each other through this process of work and preparation for the movie. And that was great to have this time.
If we're dead tomorrow, no one would know.
From the beginning, there was fantastic screen chemistry between Brad and Marianne.
Whatever that is that creates this chemistry on screen, they seem to have it. And you just issue a sigh of relief and go, God, it's working, like gangbusters. And you know what I think really helped is we really decided to try to shoot the movie in continuity. It was a very conscious choice that was actually asked for by Brad Pitt. So the first time that Marion comes on screen to work is when she meets Max for the first time. Then we take them into their apartment for the first time where they get to know each other and are slowly starting to fall in love with one another. And it grows up leading to the assassination where their love starts to blossom and then they come back into England. And so I think it actually allowed their love to grow on screen for the audience. And so the timing for filming worked perfectly. And it was really Brad who asked if this was possible. It's what he'd like to do, and so we did it.
Brad Pitt brings this kind of quiet confidence to the role that's really impressive. My first day shooting, we shot the wedding party scene, and Brad picks Marion up as we're throwing confetti on both of them, and I caught a glimpse of the 2 of them in the monitor of the camera, and it was like, oh, right, those are movie stars. Proper movie stars. They're amazing. Watching them has been a very interesting experience for me.
Our year together in the house in Hampstead has been the happiest time of my life.
It's rare that you see a movie that has such a strong, compelling story and amazing characters and incredible relationship between the 2 characters. And amazing performances by Brad Pitt and Marion Cotillard.
Max, my love, you are my world.
It was an amazing time That was very, very precious time.
I hope you will be able to forgive me. I love you with all my heart.
My cast was absolutely a magnificent and spot-on troupe of actors. Everyone who was in this movie understood their characters and performed in an inspired way.
It's been 3 fucking weeks.
Sir. It's been 3 fucking weeks, sir.
Heslop is played by Jared Harris, and he brings a great gravitas to what needs to be here when it's time for the story to be rooted in reality and giving the story a real foundation.
Marriages made in the field never work.
You're absolutely right, sir. You're invited to the wedding, by the way.
I enjoy a good old war story. It has that sort of appealing thing of it. This is a big scope movie, and those sets are fun to be on. The scale of them and what they're able to do.
Cut! That's good.
And yet, you still only get 3 takes and you're on your way, so.
Jared, that was great. Yeah, you inspired me there, so. Ooh.
It's pretty rare that you do more than that. That's because I nail it the first time.
The cast is incredible, and so just the idea of getting to be a part of this wonderfully written movie, it's like, yeah, sign me up.
To my formerly permafrosted brother. Thawed at last by love.
That's rather poetic.
I like that Bridget's a bit of a bohemian, and even though when you meet her, she's buttoned up and in her uniform, she really is a free spirit. There's something about this time in London during World War II where you would think people would be so frightened and cowering in their homes, but it was quite the opposite. They were really living life to the fullest and having all kinds of wild times, and I get to kind of play both of those things.
George?
Salute me, Frenchman.
Go to hell.
George is carefree and actually doesn't think that Max should have got married in the first place. I think he likes his friend to be a single guy so they could both go out and find women together.
I heard an unspeakable rumor about you being in love.
No.
In a film that's tension, it's nice to sometimes get a second to breathe, and that's what Daniel brings to the table.
Oh, gotta go, George. Buy me a drink later.
Max, you appear to be walking on air. It's revolting.
He has a warmth, a humour, and living with the Blitz and going, at any moment a bomb could drop on us. I'm going to party like hell. I'm going to take as many illicit substances as possible.
Max, this is splendid.
So in every blooming scene, he turns up with another darling on his arm, you know. But he's not a malicious person, you know. It's just, as he says, it's life lived in the exquisite moment of death.
My beautiful girlfriend is played by Charlotte Hope. She's a few years younger than I am, and so I feel a little lecherous, but I kind of like it. And we just kiss each other for hours a day.
Me and my mates, we'd really like to see you 2 ladies kiss each other.
I spend pretty much every scene kissing or fondling. But I think it's quite exciting that they get to be that intimate with each other in public. I think that's probably quite a thrill to them in itself. But I think ultimately they're 2 people that have found each other in the chaos and love each other very much.
Being on set was amazing. Everybody is really mellow, laid back. We finish the day at a reasonable hour. Zemeckis creates an atmosphere on the set that is exactly by design to keep everybody happy. I guess it's one of the perks of working for somebody who's been doing it for so long.
Throughout the set, you just get the best out of everybody. Because they love coming to work. That kind of a set where creativity is allowed to happen and people can do their jobs, it's wonderful to be around the fluidity of it, the ease of it.
Sorry, go ahead.
First day on a job, let alone a job with Brad Pitt and Marion Cotillard. I'm as nervous as I was my first job out of drama school. Are they thinking they've made a mistake? How am I going to do? I've only got 2 lines, 3 lines. And as I approach Bob, he's holding out his hand and says, "Congratulations." And apparently he'd heard that morning that I'd been nominated for a BAFTA, which was fantastic because I didn't know. But it was just so great because at that moment, I relaxed. And Bob said, "Oh, wow, that's great, Anton. That's so cool." And Marion said, "What's that? What's that?" And it was just perfect, absolutely. I couldn't have designed it better.
Everybody did a fantastic job. Everyone brought, immense amount of energy and emotion to everything that they were playing.
It's always the people. It's a joy to be working with people who are so super professional about what they do and at the same time, decent human beings, because life's short.